Are we seeing service point? Perfect. So in the balance of state site, so to get to the SAP platform, as a note, in balance of state, you may or may not have an SAP license. So in Maricopa, everyone has a license for SAP. In balance of state, only some individuals and agencies do. That is the process sort of that ADO has opted with for a long time. So if you don't have access to an SAP license in your agency, please connect with the HMIS team, and we've been more than happy to sort that out, get you one temporarily assigned, because this is important enough for us to make sure that you have that access. So there's actually a couple of ways to connect to business objects. I always connect up here through the connect to business objects. You can also go to reports, and there is also a business objects button down here. So either one will get you to the same place. They both pop up a new tab, and we have a whole folder structure here. So we'll show you to navigate to the reports in both Balance of State and Maricopa. So in Balance of State, you'll click on Folders. You'll click on Public Folders, and the Arizona Department of Housing Live. And there's a report called Federal Reports, which I just put a check mark next to. And we see HIC.PIT. So we'll click that. And we'll look at the 628 and the 630 reports. I'll also just go quickly over where it is in Arizona, or excuse me, Maricopa. It's very similar. So in Maricopa, you would see Arizona Live as a folder. You would go to Federal Reports, and then you go to HIC.PIT, and you see the same reports. So the same file structure, same way to get there in both continuums. So if you work in both Balance of State as well as Maricopa, it'll be pretty straightforward. We're also working this year to make sure that if you have an agency in both Balance of State and Maricopa, that you're working with the same person. It's just there's less back and forth and less confusion with who you're supposed to be contacting. So we'll go to the Balance of State side, since that's the service point implementation that we are in. Click on Federal Reports, click on HIC.PIT, and I'll show you to run both these reports. So we'll start with the 0628. We just click on it, and we'll provide some prompts. So we have select provider. That's the only thing that you have to fill out. Now, the 628 is for permanent housing. So at the top, you see PSH, RH, OPH. If we try to run this in a shelter or transitional housing program, it's just not going to work. So it's not the report's broken, it's just the wrong program type. So when you have those projects, we'll just make sure that we use permanent housing projects. So all I do is select the project. The EDA provider you can leave alone, and the effective date is already set. So all the dates are set already, so you're good to go. So I'll just run this, and that will run the report. I'll show you to run the 630 as well for shelters, transitional housing projects, and safe havens. It's going to be exactly the same thing, so that's nice. So again, select provider is the only thing they have to worry about. So we're just going to select let's see here, a shelter. And then the effective date's already populated, nothing else to be done. You can only select one provider at a time. So if you have 10 providers, for example, or 10 shelters, you just report 10 times to get the client count for each of the 10 projects. So I know agencies with a lot of projects, that's sort of more inconvenient. You're more familiar with the process for sure, but I know that can take a lot of time. So, but again, you just run it. And again, it would just run that report. So it will populate in here. I'm just going to go ahead and let's see here. Oops, got the wrong one. Let's see. So there's a number of tabs at the top. So you can look at this in SAP, or you can download it. I'll download a report so we don't have showing any agency's information in the AHW. But to download this report, you can click in this little arrow here. And there is an Excel, PDF, all sorts of options. If you want to just manipulate and work with the data, Excel is a good way to do that. But the final reports should be the PDF itself. So you want to make sure that you select all reports, and it'll download that information into a PDF. So I'll pull up those PDFs. I'll start with the 630. Same thing here. So again, this is a balance of state. In Maricopa, you'd see slightly different information because it would show a different night. But in balance of state, it gives you instructions. We start by verifying the number of clients served. If they're correct, proceed. But we'll just do this together so we don't have to read all this fun stuff. So the first thing we're doing is we're just going to whatever provider we happen to be, and we're verifying that these counts are correct. So this is saying on the night of the PIT, we served 38 clients in this project, and they were all households without children. If that is correct, fantastic, and move on. If it is not correct, if this was supposed to be 50, that means the data in HMIS was not correct, and we have to fix it. At that point, we have to figure out what's wrong, what we're missing. The second page actually shows a list of the clients served. So you can go and see exactly, which clients are being pulled into the report itself. The provider does populate when you run it yourself. We just wanted to exclude it for this training. But it'll show the start date. It'll show, the client ID. And you can go into HMIS and sort of sort out what's happening. Sometimes you might have too many clients. You expect this to be 30, but there's 38. You can go to the next list and say, okay, which of these clients are not actually in the program and which ones should be exited. In either case, you're going to have to go into HMIS itself and correct that data. So if you're going into test distance profile, as an example, if it's wrong, you have to add that enrollment, like, test distance is part of the program. Then on the report, I have to go ahead and add that enrollment into HMIS. Or they might need an exit. You can exit that information as well. Either way, the goal is to correct the information in Service Point. And then you would rerun the report. Oops, that's not what I'm trying to pull up here. You would rerun the report the next day. So let's say this is supposed to be 50. I went to Service Point. I made 12 corrections or added 12 clients. I can't do anything for the rest of the day, basically. I have to go ahead and wait until the next day when SAP refreshes and then rerun the report. And you'll just keep on doing that until that client count is correct. Again, we in the HMIS team can help anybody with those processes, any questions. It can get kind of tricky understanding exactly the enrollments or exits depending on the size of the program or the intricacies. But when you run the report again and the information is correct, we're just going to move on to verify the additional information about the projects. But we can't do that until we verify this client count, because it's going to be one of the most critical pieces in this process is making sure that client count is correct. So now we verified, okay, this is all looking good. We can go past this list of clients served. Awesome. And then we're going to verify some provider information. So this is pretty straightforward. This doesn't change a ton from year to year, but we'll verify the address, the city, the zip code where my parents live, because it's not in Arizona, and then the program type, housing type, and target population. There's little descriptions on the right side, so that's awesome. And if something like this is wrong, like the program type, like it says emergency shelter, and you're like, oh, this is a permanent housing program, that is a significant problem. And like, we would love that to be communicated like as soon as possible. Or if you're finding that this information is reporting zeros and there's data in there, the wrong program type might be recorded in Service Point as well. So it is really important to make sure that this information is correct. And then we have the correct housing type and target population. If there's any errors here, you can't update it directly, so just make a note of that for later. It also goes over the funding sources. So this project says there's no current funding sources. We just want to make sure that this information is correct. This is the wildest information that we have in Service Point and the hardest to verify, the one that seems to be the biggest struggle for everyone across the board. But if it says something sort of like COVID funds, that's going to be incorrect at this point in the vast majority of cases. You just want to let us know or make a note that's saying, hey, like your funding source is wrong for this project. The next page just shows a list of all the federal grant types. So if you're federally funded but not sure which one, these are the ones that HMIS sort of records. And then the final piece is just verifying the bed and unit inventory. So this is always a tricky one as well. It's easier for projects that are brick and mortar, harder for ones that are voucher based. But if you're a brick and mortar building, we just want to make sure this is correct. So, okay, yes, it looks like as of the night of the PIT on 122 in Balance Estate, we did have 24 beds available and 24 units. It'll be more important to focus on the beds. Units can be sort of weird if you just serve single adults. but units is really number of households. So if this is correct, you're good to go. If it's not, for example, this project shows it served 38 clients on the night of the pit. This project is way over capacity, and that does happen sometimes, or they might have increased the number of beds they had in the past year. Either case, we just want to verify, hey, 24 beds is correct, and we serve 38 clients. We'll probably follow up and say, hey, like this is going to be flagged. Like, just do you have overflow beds? Like, how is it that the project is so over capacity? More often, what happens is back in July we added 20 beds, so this should be 44 and not 24. But once you look at the information, we're going to verify. The most important thing when submitting the PDF is making sure that this number is correct. And then you would just go ahead and attach that report to an email. I'm going to pull up the 0628 as well, because it is very similar with one really significant difference. This information is the same. The only difference here is that this is looking for clients who are housed on the night of the pit. So if you have 100 clients in your permanent housing program and 50 are housed and 50 clients are looking, have a voucher but are not yet housed, don't have a lease, only the clients who are housed will show up on this report. The HIC is only looking for clients who are literally sheltered and housed on the night of the pit. So we just want to be really careful to understand that this number is showing the clients who are housed and not all clients in your program when you have a PSH, a RAPID, or an other permanent housing program. The same thing applies here. You want to make sure this number is correct. If it's not correct, it'll go ahead and you'll need to fix it in Service Point. For the 628 clients without a housing move-in date, either a valid one or without any at all, will show up as red in the move-in date. This client is excluded from the report because they have an entry date in July of 2024, and their housing move-in date is before that. So this is a good way to sort of investigate, okay, yeah, this client is searching for housing, they're not yet housed, they're not supposed to be counted. But on the other hand, if this client has been housed recently and should be in the report, this is an indication that in Service Point, we have to go in and correct some information. But just like the 630 report for shelters, transitional housing, and safe havens, for this report here, we're just going to verify this information. If it's correct, awesome. We'll move on to verify other information. If it's not correct, we'll fix the information in Service Point and come back the next day to carry on. Otherwise, this is exactly the same process as the last report. We'll verify all this information. Once again, we'll verify the funding type, and we'll also verify bed availability. As a note, for projects that do have vouchers, we will calculate those beds in most cases. So you might receive this little note. If you have a fixed number of vouchers, then you'll want to contact us about what that is. That's almost never applicable unless you have a HUD-VASH program. In the vast majority of cases, if you have vouchers, tenant-based, scattered site, whatever we call it, the HMIS team will calculate the number of beds and units on your behalf. So super easy. This is true for RAPID projects 100% of the time. If you're in RAPID, don't worry about beds or units. Just let the HMIS team record it according to federal regulations. So once you verify the count of clients and you audit this other information, we just send an email to the HMIS team. So I'll close out these reports and I will pull up an email and I will just say, this is what I'm emailing to the HMIS support team. I'll want to go ahead and attach those reports that I just verified. And I'll say attach the final 630, 628 reports. The count of clients in both is correct. And then this is where you ask us to make changes. So for example, for the ES project, the inventory, cannot type correctly or fast enough, is 40 and not 24. Recall in our first report, we had 38 clients and 24 beds. So I'm just going to say theoretically, okay, like that 24 beds was an old number. We really have 40 beds. So this is just a note saying clients are correct. And please update the inventory to show 40 beds, not 24. X, Y, and Z funding. is no longer correct. Our updated address is 123 Big Street. Whatever it might be, and you might have nothing to verify or change, or you might have something, but the email with the verified client counts and the body of the emails, we're going to sort of say, hey, this is what the inventory should be, this is what the unit should be, and all that fun stuff. Once that happens, once all that's done, you just send that email to the HMIS team. We'll take a look. In the vast majority of cases, there's no follow-up. In some cases, we will follow up because HUD is really finicky about certain things. So we'll just have to respond to certain items here and there.